We now have a quorum, so can I remind members that this meeting will be recorded and ask you to note that mobile phones should be switched off as they interfere with the recording. Tablet devices should be switched to mute. Can I remind members to declare their interest as appropriate throughout the meeting? Can I declare the meeting open to the public? Agenda item 1. Are there any apologies? Apologies. Agenda item 2. We have an oral briefing from DARD going for growth. Can I refer members to the memo from the clerk at pages 5 to 6 and papers from the department at page 7. Can I welcome Tony O'Neill, Agri-Food Strategy Board Chair, Colette McMaster, Assistant Secretary, and Dan Garland, Deputy Principal. We have a short one-page paper from yourselves. Can I ask you to take a few minutes to update the committee and brief us for a few minutes, and then we'll take questions, we hope. Okay?
Would you like me to start off just with the foot of the paper that we sent? Would that be useful? It's just really to what we had done was simply to give the committee a sort of a short list of the sort of key actions that had already been progressed pending the executive's agreement of the response to going for growth. So that's really just to explain what that is, and there are 10 actions really there that were sort of drawn out for you, and I suppose those were the key actions that a lot of them that fall to DARD. First of those being the draft rural development programme 2014-2020. That's a programme we'll be presenting to the committee on later today, obviously. So that actually in itself, that programme, and I'll just say there are, out of the 81 recommendations addressed to government, DARD's leading on 38. The rural development programme actually sort of picks up on 14 of those actions. So there's a substantial amount of the response from DARD is incorporated in the rural development programme. Were flagged there other things that have already happened, which are the deferral of introduction charges for export health certificates for meat and dairy products, opening of Singapore markets to Northern Ireland beef. Mentioned the programme of visits by ministers to key markets to continue seeking to open up key markets. Ministers just recently appointed a TB strategic partnership, and members of that, chair and members of that. DARD's increased the number of DARD funded postgraduates, launched Research Challenge Fund, and there's a DARD funded contact point at AFBI who's there to assist researchers and businesses in making applications to the Horizon 2020 research funding programme. As you'll be aware, DARD also opened a third tranche of the manure efficiency technology scheme earlier this year, and have been working with DEDI and InvestNI to launch a loan scheme to support the sustainable use of poultry litter. Just wanted to explain that at the outset, as in that is not all the DARD actions, but that is just giving you a sort of flavour of some of the progress that's been made to date on that. So,
yeah. To us.
Thank you, Chairman, for inviting us today.
Okay.
I suppose I have to congratulate you for sitting there.
Thank you.
Hopefully that means I have more friends on that side of the table than I usually have. So does Joanne's on my right. Hopefully Edwin's on my left.
Be worried, Tony.
Don't have your chickens before the hatch. Got a plum.
But I have continuity with Sydney, who is with us this morning. I would, if you like, make a few comments before we open the thing to discussion. I have to apologise. I am running for a flight this afternoon, so I may end up and run away if the conversation gets difficult, you know. But I'll select that as the session goes on. It's some time since I did meet this committee, so it's good to get back in the room and talk to you. You're, I think, clearly aware the agri-food sectors continue to grow. Last year we recorded about 7% growth year on year. So we've continued to grow, and I would say be successful throughout these times. The strength of our products and the offering that we make, again, I think are clearly recognised by the success of Northern Ireland companies in the Great Taste Awards, where some were like 99 Northern Ireland companies secured 264 awards in the recent round of the panel. So we are continuing to be successful and in many cases batting above our weight, because that represents much more success in our region compared to any of the other regions in the UK on a relative scale. So we are continue to be successful. That's not to say that everything is rosy in the sector, because we continue to fight for sustainable competitiveness in our industry. We have all seen the volatility of different sectors over this past year. The retail trade is a very volatile place at the moment. I think everybody's very aware of that. The rise and fall of some of the retailers and the difficulties that they're going through. And those changes bring pressure into the sector. But if you recall the last time we met, I talked about volatility. We're in a very volatile time. But even with that volatility, we see many signs of success and growth within our industry. Our Going for Growth paper had the key theme running through it of a sustainable, joined-up supply chain, right from farm to processors to the retail industry. And we can see some signs of progress along that journey in many areas. You will all be aware that in June, the Deputy and Dard ministers made the announcement that the Executive had accepted our core recommendation of the Farm Business Improvement Scheme and supporting the programme for £250 million of capital investment in our farm businesses. So, whilst I would say quite clearly it took a long time to get there, it is nevertheless successful that we are now in that place. Over this past 12 months, really, we continue to develop some of our activities within the Food Strategy Board, that it's not just meeting, if you like, on an annual basis. We do meet regularly. We continue to make progress in a lot of the detailed schemes. And I have personally been involved in quite a number of the schemes, including the marketing activity that we have described as part of our key recommendations. The Draft Rural Development Programme will be used, or is the vehicle that the Farm Business Improvement Scheme will be delivered to, and DARD and the different departments are working in the detail of how to make that happen. The board, Agri-Food Strategy Board, are scheduled to remain in position to early 2015. I think it's now time to put on the table that we need to consider extending that remit to keep the board in position to continue to drive the actions coming out of the Going for Growth beyond early 2015. I think that we have lost a fair amount of time in getting to where we are today. So we've in many ways lost 15, 18 months of our programme in the timetable of delivering Going for Growth and getting executive approval for it, which, by the way, is now done. So it caused trouble, I have no doubt, to some people that it has been signed off over this past few days by ministers, and I expect you will be getting formal copies of that within probably the next 24 hours. So if you like, the programme is now fully developed, officially accepted by all the departments, and now it's really time to drive some of those actions through. I think it's incumbent that we keep the Agri-Food Strategy Board in place to make sure that happens. I do appreciate that we are in pretty difficult budgetary times, and I would make the point, and I would make the point very firmly, that it's even more reason why the Executive should support the agri-food industry. We clearly will need increased economic activity in Northern Ireland in the coming years to offset some of our changes between public sector and private sector. It's critical that we generate the jobs to keep our people employed, and the agri-food sector clearly offers many opportunities to do that at all levels, from, let's say, normal people to rocket scientists. So I would make the point to you today that it is even more important to keep focus on delivering the executive's commitment to the agri-food sector. Chairman, back to you and open to the floor.
Thank you very much. As you're aware, and you've touched on in several sectors, just recently the beef sector and now the dairy sector, you've seen a lot of volatility in that market, and prices have dipped and seem to be dipping further. Farmers need to be profitable for the future. Can you see any way of creating a situation where farmers can get a more level playing field and prices are more stable?
It's very difficult to, if you like, give you a simple answer to that. We have talked about the volatility in the market. We clearly have said that a core principle on the Food Strategy Board recommendations is that we need a sustainable supply chain. So the farmer has to survive as well as the processor. I think we have seen gains in some of the sectors. Last time I got ambushed, I think, on the price of beef, but the price of beef today is clearly linked to the fact that I've joined the beef sector. So we have the highest beef price that we've ever seen. And it's strong and getting better. The poultry sector has seen significant success this past 18 months, 2 years. So whilst there is volatility, there's clear signs of progress in many of the sectors. Dairy at the moment's down, but I suspect it'll bounce back again fairly quickly. So I think we can see long-term growth in all sectors, but it's the classic heart attack curve. You know, it's up and down, but there's a trend always up.
There's a farm business improvement scheme, 250 million grant aid. Now, there's a limit on each application of 250,000 of grant aid. Would you have any concerns that 250,000 level of grant aid, a small number of farms could, or a small number of businesses could gobble up a lot?
I would actually come from the other side. I think, if you like, opportunities will come along at whatever size they are. As a principle, I believe that we shouldn't have caps. We've had many discussions about caps being used as a mechanism, if you like, to spread the budget over many applications. I actually think that the projects will come forward on their merit and should be judged on their merit without caps. Fundamentally, I think if there are big projects and there are big opportunities, there are big job creation opportunities, I think they should stand on their merit. And I frankly don't believe we should have caps. It is one of my major issues that Northern Ireland invents limits that we don't need to, whilst we trade in Wales, we trade in Scotland, and they don't put caps on. So we should never accept that Northern Ireland should be disadvantaged against our competitive set, is our position.
And I fully understand where you're coming from. Just if you have a limited budget, that's where I come from. You have a limited budget, and just there is difficulties I see in the possibility that a small number of farms could.
And I understand that, and what we need is a scheme that is, if you like, smart enough and flexible enough that we protect both ends. But we, as I say, we should not put, let's say, anti-competitive measures in place, because we're in a very competitive situation. Whether we all think that we are brothers, but Wales wants to beat us, Scotland wants to beat us. Never mind the fact that Southern Ireland have competitive programmes as well. So we shouldn't put, as policy, limits on. We may find that we have to put operational limits in place, depending on what conditions apply to us. But we should start with a broad spectrum and then focus it on what I consider to be focused investment.
Joe Byrne.
Yes, Chairman, thanks, and again welcome to Tony and the team. In relation to the agreement between the two ministries, I think that was crucially important. You have mentioned that we have lost out on 15 to 18 months of a lead-in time. In your opinion, Tony, what are the major constraints at the moment on trying to realise the necessary outcomes, economic growth, economic expansion, relating to the amount of investment that's going to be put in?
I think, you know, the two things that are happening, and if I remind you, if you like, of the investment of my park and processing, so that there are pretty progressive companies that are willing to continue to invest in processing capabilities. Our farm base has not kept up with that. Part of the argument that I've always had in the My Park situation was growing poultry houses to allow us to grow more birds. We currently see the same constraint on red meat in Northern Ireland. We're not generating enough red meat to keep up with processing capability and processing demand. So the Farm Business Improvement Programme is critical to me, and one of my personal frustrations is because it is linked in the RDP programme, it's another year away before we can actually see that taking place. And that's unfortunate. I think we should be seeing that action on the ground now.
And following that, Chairman, can I ask, this is a small region with small regional banks. Given that some of this investment is going to require co-match funding from the private business sector, are our banks fit for purpose to meet the needs to realise this growth that we're hoping for?
I think it's a challenge. Clearly you're aware that part of our recommendations was the agri-food loan scheme, which was targeted, if you like, to let's say put a little bit of competition in with the banks. It is very difficult today to get significant funding into the banks without them asking for so much security and so low a risk that frankly they don't invest. So using the agri-food loan scheme, we were able to trigger, let's say, competition from the banks, and we were reasonably successful in doing that. But I think that needs to be used, if you like, as a tool in our armoury to keep that going. In the My Park context, we brought in foreign banks, and I think that is quite likely to continue in Northern Ireland because the local banks are not sufficiently interested in investment.
Thanks, Chairman. Just can we make one supplementary to that? How have you found the administration of the agri-loan scheme working out for the particular farmer that seeks that sort of aid and help?
I think it's been more difficult than it was supposed to be.
More difficult than necessary?
Yes.
Thanks, Chairman.
Bond option.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I made it clear from the start that my husband's a beef and cereal farmer. Tony, can I thank you for your briefing? You talk about the significant progress that has been made, although I note that we only have a single sheet briefing on that progress. Just by way of background, I hosted a group of young farmers here last Wednesday night, and during a question and answer with them, I asked them their opinions on going for growth. And they stared at me blankly. I hadn't heard of it. And it seemed, one explained to them, it seemed to them that it was a storming document that had little relevance to them as the young farmers and the future of our industry. So suppose my first question would be, what more do you think you could do to reassure those farmers of the benefits of the action plan, because they feel they didn't know about it and feel detached from it? And a note you said in your introduction, you spoke of the sustainable supply chain. And as you know, I previously asked you at the launch of Going for Growth in the Stormont Hotel. I think it was the first question that morning. And you told me this was a processor-led action plan. So is this still the case? And where do you see the role of the farmer in this plan?
I think there are three parts to that. The bit of engaging the young farmers is interesting, and I don't know the answer to that. I'll take that off and talk to some of my colleagues. I can tell you that I have briefed, sounds a bit formal. I have spoken at a number of young farmer events, including I've been to Harbour Adams and so on, speaking to the young farmers. and had significant feedback, if you like, where young farmers come along afterwards saying, "Can we do this, this, and this?" So I've had some of that, but I wouldn't claim that we've covered every young farmer there is. I will talk to the Young Farmers Club to see how much more engagement we can actually have with them, because
And I'm
that's
happy to share details of quite a large group I had.
that's a very valid comment, I must admit. It's probably an age thing. I thought, talking to the Farmers Union, that I was doing well, because we have made a lot of progress in joining up with the Farmers Union, but I'll take that offline. I'll talk to the Farmers Union about how we can move that down into Young Farmers Clubs. In terms of our progress, I would say, and I've said it, I think more times than people are comfortable with, we have taken too long to get where we are today. We have lost a lot of time, we've lost a lot of momentum, but we have made good progress in some areas, just not enough. So I think we are now in a place where, if you like, the reasons why not are behind us. That needs to be accepted and pushed on.
Okay. Edwin Poots.
Yeah. In terms of going for growth, I suppose, and you now mentioned that you're in the red meat sector, and everybody be delighted to have a man's understanding and stature in the red meat sector, Tony, no doubt, and will have great anticipation and expectations as a consequence of that. But in the red meat sector, it has had its struggles and trials over the years, and I suppose over the course of the last year it has been a difficult one, and a lot of people have recorded fairly significant losses in the last year. That has been further compounded by the Ford movement being introduced by the supermarkets, and has been further compounded by the animals that have been in the south of Ireland for fattening, not having a status that would allow them to be used in the supermarkets. Some of the best cattle in the country, by the way, some of the best beef that you could get was falling into that category. So it's difficult to grow a sector against that backdrop, and I know that there is concern in the sector that it's problematic to sustain all of the existing meat plants with the level of activity that has taken place. So it's a sector that badly needs growth, otherwise we're going to hit a fairly significant problem. So it may be slightly easier to grow the beef sector if the dairy sector isn't as vibrant and isn't as strong, because there's always a temptation for people to move from one sector to the other. But have you any thoughts on how actually we can take the beef sector forward at this stage? And you've indicated that in recent days prices have went up, and I see the pound is weakened a bit in this week, which will also help. But how do we actually ensure that we, in a volatile global market, we can continue to grow a beef sector and it doesn't become like the pig sector, where the volatility actually just screened an awful lot of people out of it?
One of the, if you like, key elements of the Going for Growth plan was this bit of linking our production from the dairy herd into the beef sector. It is, and you can see bits of it starting already. It is, if you like, a method of adding value both to the black and whites and to the beef sector to control the genetics we're using to generate the dairy herd, and to take crossbreeds off the dairy to feed to supply the beef sector. And that brings us into the discussion of, let's say we start to control the genetics, we start to control the animals coming from the dairy herd into the beef sector, we start to control calving units, and then move into grower and finishing units. I can tell you, and I'm sure you're fully aware of the fact that some of those things we're already starting to move on. So we have created some calving units. We have started to work with some of the dairy guys to work on the genetics of the crosses that are coming from them. So lots of the things that we've talked about, we are now starting to put pieces of the jigsaw together. And that bringing that or building that into the end-to-end supply chain is what we see as the core of the farm business improvement schemes. So that we can build the physical calving units, because there are not very many. In fact, there are very limited calving units in Northern Ireland. The buildings are not there, the farm structure is not there. So those are the things that we see as part of this farm business improvement investment that actually start to make these things viable units in the longer term. They have to have a scale and a professionalism that allows them to generate the right product at the right price. And I've said it before, and I don't think you'll be surprised. There is no way that the beef sector can sustain 25,000 farmers. It probably needs 5,000 bigger, efficient ones. But there's a role for the smaller farmers in a different context, that they are there in many cases to look after the land rather than to produce food in a competitive environment. So there's different parts of our agenda we see as addressing the different parts of it. But I think over the next 2 years we'll see more and more of that taking place, and that will drive more and more efficiency in the supply chain, and therefore long-term competitive and a sustainable industry.
Okay. Alderman Wall.
Yes, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Tony. It's interesting, you know, the fact that we're talking about maybe moving away from more farms to less farms, concentrating on that. But when we talk about the financial market and borrowing money, it's interesting to see that you've noted that the European banks would come in and fund. But it's very hard for the small man to get a fund from European banks. The bigger conglomerates can do that. And if we are to grow the market here, as you see yourself, the local banks are not in favour of lending money for expansion. And that sort of catches your market here a little bit to it stifles production, it stifles expansion. Is there any way we can encourage more of the European banks to come in here? Because yes, I will agree with you, that is the way to get other finance in here. Because at the present time, the financial institutes we have here that will help fund expansion is not really working.
Well, I don't want to be on a downer in the local banks. I think lots of the banks, if you like, work within their lines of authority. Most of our banks now are offshoots of the banks based somewhere else, and decisions are usually made, let's say, offshore. But as I say, we have been successful in bringing in other banks into Northern Ireland. I think it actually goes back to a point that Joanne made earlier on, that I do believe that a large part of the responsibility lies with processors. Processors are the guys that can bring in the banks, but it has to be part of a joined-up plan that they can introduce and facilitate investment on farm as part of a joined-up programme. So I think we, as industry and processors, we can help with the banking even within the farm base, and it's a challenge to us to actually do that. Say we did do that in Moy Park. We are currently looking at how we do that in other sectors, and I think it is a key bit that we have to bring to the party.
Do you see then the beef sector probably going down the same road as the hen sector did, where the farmer was basically working for the producer and rearing the bird for the table and getting paid for doing that? Could that be a long-term thing for the smaller farmer to do?
Well, I think that's a challenge. I don't know the answer to that. I have to say, you know, I'm an expert of 6 weeks in the beef sector, so I need to be very careful that, you know, I assume everything's easy, and it's never quite that easy. But nevertheless, it's the same fundamental. We have to pay farmers to be efficient, and we have to have a mechanic that encourages farmers to be efficient. And that means we have to change the way we deal with the red meat sector, particularly today, because today it's it's so volatile. It's not good for anybody.
Thank you.
Okay. Tom Elliott.
Chair, thank you, and thanks very much for the presentation, folks. Just a query first on your report. Just for clarification, I noticed you mentioned that within the industry there's approximately 47,000 employed in agriculture, 27,000 in the agri-food industry general, which brings you up to 74,000. You intend to increase that by 15,000, which my calculation brings you up to 89. But you are saying that by 2020 it will be up at 115,000.
We would actually say this closer
There
to
seems to be a difference of...
we would actually say this closer to 100,000 in the supply chain today, because if you look at let's say the supporting industries, because when you consider all of the Northern Ireland producers, every one of us have got packaging suppliers, we've got engineering suppliers, we've got cleaning suppliers. We've got a whole myriad of related service industries in the Northern Ireland economy that actually are linked to us. So we would say we're closer to 100,000 jobs in total today. And
So your figures in your introduction is not accurate?
That's
what you're saying?
That's only some of them, is what I'm saying. So if you look at the total base, including the retailers, we're saying we're starting from 100,000 going to 115,000 is where we actually say we are.
Okay. Given the significant increase proposed in jobs, do you see a topic that's very relevantly talked about at the moment? Do you see fracking playing any role within your increase in jobs?
It wasn't on the table whenever we put our thinking hats on about jobs, so no, it didn't feature in our discussion.
And still doesn't?
No, we do. We do have the thing of, let's say, competitive energy sources. Where it comes from, we don't get into that.
Okay. So you don't see it forming part of your overall strategy?
It hasn't featured in our strategy. For instance, we have made a recommendation on gas for the West, which is now progressing. So things like that.
Gas from the West?
Okay.
I couldn't possibly comment.
Okay, thanks, Chip.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into politics, but I'm an engineer, so I'm driven by fact.
Seriously, Chair, I'm just trying to get a handle if it would form any part of their proposals at any stage or come into any part of their thinking.
Well, as I say, in fairness, it wasn't on the table when we went through this discussion. Our focus was on getting energy at a competitive price. So that's where we come from. As I said before, we continue in existence. We're still there. We still debate whether our strategy needs changed or their direction. So no doubt it'll come up in discussion in the future.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Joe Byrne.
Yeah, Chairman, just and I asked a supplementary relating to two answers, one you gave me and one you gave Edmund. Are you now saying, Tony, that really to address the red meat sector going forward and to utilise the processing capacity, have to have calving units of very large numbers, and therefore the man that has the 20 to 40 suckler cows is inefficient and won't be able to arrive?
I'm saying there's a range of answers to make this work, and I do make a very clear distinction that there is a need to drive efficiency and intensification, and then there is a place for many small farmers in Northern Ireland that frankly you couldn't make viable by paying them for their beef because they don't produce enough. It's a part-time job, and in many ways I see those people as the stewards of the land. Their real reason for living is to look after the environment, look after the land, not to compete in the world market for the price of beef. So there's two different agendas going as far as I'm concerned. There's one that says to be efficient and to live in a competitive environment, which we have to live in, we have to be very efficient, which brings scale into it. There's a different agenda that says there's a role for smaller farmers to look after the land and look after the environment that we all appreciate. So I think there's two different agendas and we should understand that.
Thanks. Chairman, can I ask one more question? Poultry litter. Where are we at in relation to meaningfully and realistically and practically dealing with poultry litter, or do we want this to continue in a sort of an ad hoc process as a cheap fertiliser?
I'm not a farmer, so I couldn't possibly comment on cheap fertiliser. I've changed my hat, but I can tell you that in relatively short number of weeks ago, I signed a contract for the first major disposal of poultry litter in Northern Ireland. So there are things happening today to address poultry litter that we've been waiting on for 10 years. So there are good things happening, and there's good progress there. But it'll be probably 18 months before you see significant changes there. But I signed contracts before I left my park. The research project was sponsored by Darden Deddy continues, and some of that is coming forward now as well. So there is much more, I wouldn't say grounds for optimism. There's much more concrete things happening now to address litter than has been in place for this last 10 years.
Thanks.
Okay, Joanne wants another
Thanks, Chair. Tony, could I ask finally then, have you been given an assurance that the funding for Going for Growth will not be held up during their current funding problems at Stormont?
The direct answer to that is no, but I have clear support from both ministers, and it is a priority for the executive. So I don't see that should be a problem or it should be a challenge. Clearly, our effort in the coming months will be to fight our corner, and I would certainly be looking support from this committee to make sure that it isn't allowed to deteriorate.
With no assurance?
No assurance.
Okay, thank you.
Come on.
Chair, thanks. Just briefly, given the overall sector, and I've said it here before, that the processor makes their profit, the retailer makes their profit, and the farmer's left with what's left, whether that's a profit or not. Have you anything in the Going for Growth proposals that will actually safeguard the farmer so that they can ensure profitability as opposed to just being left with what they get?
Well, we haven't said there's a formula to guarantee that. What we have said, and I go back to my earlier comment about the Farm Business Improvement Scheme, we have said that we need to build new and different models to make that process viable for both the farmer and the processor. So I think we need a different model. I have indicated in a way how I see that evolving with the beef side, because I do see that we can control the genetics and we can control the calving, we can control the line to the processor, so that is actually one, let's say, a formal supply chain. But in many ways means that there has to be contracts in place to make that happen, otherwise you can't control it. So as I say, I see that starting to evolve now, and that will be our major effort on how do we focus this 250 million in the right places to get the right answer. So you can't simply take the 250 million investment and say we'll spread it over everybody. It has to be focused investment to get the right result.
So you're thinking of some sort of contract process right back to the farmer? Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. You made a comment about there being 25,000 farmers in Northern Ireland, and really to be efficient, it's much better to have 5,000. Not a contradiction, but in respect of that, obviously we've just been engaged in a process around how we make changes to single farm payment and all of that there. I would actually see that's actually bringing more small farmers into play, because there's people who previously let their land are now wanting to become active farmers. So in some senses what I do see from it is, people who are sitting here today in front of us referring to growth and how we can actually ensure that we drive up what Northern Ireland sells in terms of its food and so forth. But yet we have other actions which seem to be contradicting what you're saying.
As I say, I think there's two different agendas going. There's one is stewardship of the land, but if I go back to the fundamental of the Farm Business Improvement Scheme, we're going to invest £250 million in farms. We need to invest it in farms that are capable of growing and are being efficient. So to me, the challenge in the coming few years really is to devise a scheme that allows you to target your investment, that you just don't say it's available to all farmers, all they have to do is apply. It has to be, in my mind, a focused investment to actually drive farm sustainability and efficiency.
And will part of that be encouraging young people to take up farming or to become much more advanced in farming? Because we have many young people who are out working.
Absolutely.
And working part-time on a farm.
Well, there is support, preferential support for young farmers today, and I see the more aggressive farmers, if you like, tend to be the younger guys. That's not to say that it's an exclusive range of the younger guys. We certainly need the young guys for the future.
Okay. Alderman Mullin.
Sorry, just quickly, what's your view on the present government stance on their anti-Europe? And if they do get back in again in the next election and do take us out of Europe, as what they'd like us to do, how will that affect farming here?
It's a very difficult question. This says time for me to run for the airplane and I can't speak anymore. I would be concerned if we come out of Europe. I don't think it's in our interest. And I think I would leave it at that. It would be a huge step into the unknown and introduce huge volatility that would probably damage the small upward.
Thank you.
Okay. Sydney Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you again, Tony. Seems a long time since this morning. Just in some of the questions that have already been asked, this 250 million, and I think you talked to Edwin there about devising a scheme. But can you elaborate on this scheme to get this 250? Is that tied in with the size of the farm or the acreage, as we've already talked about, small farmers maybe coming back into play here because of cap and such like? But what do you mean when you say devise the proper scheme here to get this allocated in the proper manner? I'm reading this.
I think the answer is we're still working on how to make the scheme, if you like, how to target the scheme. But if I make the point that it's supposed to be for a farm that is part of a supply chain, so it has to be part of a solution that says if we invest in calf rearing, is the example that I think is very simple. So you're building farm buildings to do calf rearing as part of a contract to supply Dunbea, for instance, so that you're actually part of a supply chain, rather than I'm building it in speculation and I'm going out and I'm going to find somebody to buy my animals off me afterwards. So it has to be some sort of a joined up scheme that you can say there is a structure to this. Not every farmer that wants to build calf rearing schemes regardless. That means then that there's many of them, there's no regulation in the marketplace, and therefore the product that's coming out of that is going to be in an oversupply situation which drives the prices down. So it has to be in some sort of a structured environment that ensures that the farmer is going to get a sustainable income out of it afterwards, that it isn't just into a free market situation that his investment is wasted.
Yeah,
so it's things like that.
Yeah, I think we agree that it has to be structured in such a way that certainly that it's not driving prices that's going off at the edge here. But can you see that scheme? How do you get that in place and to move it sort of? What's the time scale?
Well, as I said before, and maybe this is where Colette should step into the thing, this will be part of the rollout of the RDP programme the back end of next year. So between now and then, the details of how to actually make that work will be worked up by the department to say, this is how we make sure that it meets the requirements of the food strategy requirements, not that it's simply 250 million spread over 25,000 farmers.
I'll come in on this then.
Okay.
It's part of the Farm Business Improvement Scheme. The proposals for that we have built into the Rural Development Programme 2014 to 2020. That's part of the draft programme that we'll be speaking to you on just shortly. But what it is, the Farm Business Improvement Scheme, we've sought to reflect what the board have recommended in Going for Growth in terms of providing support that would help improve product competitiveness and productivity. Reduction, it'll involve measures that would help support increased efficiency, upskilling on farm, farm modernisation, and a commitment to working as part of supply chain partners to improve performance. So those are all elements that we'll be building in as part of the design of the schemes. Now, it's not a single scheme, it's a collection, it's a programme of schemes. So there'll be measures that support training, advice, and working in cooperation with others, as well as the capital investment support that Tony's mentioned that will actually be a substantial part of the 250 million will be in the capital investment. But the whole thinking is that a farmer will, before he decides to make that investment, will have thought very carefully about his own farm business and where he needs to be in the future. So there'll be training there, there'll be advice to help a farmer think through those things before he embarks on the capital investment. As part of the basic eligibility condition for the capital investment element, then we're proposing to ask applicants to have a business plan to demonstrate how they would, what their plan is for improvement on their farm. And so that will be part of the sort of application for the capital investment. So together, overall, as a structure, it's being designed to sort of help farmers make the right decisions through that investment path. We're working on that now currently, and it's going in as part of the draft programme to the Commission, but we'll be continuing to work up the detail of how that works. And prepare for when it's all subject to Commission approval and business case approval, but we'll be in parallel working up the detail of how those schemes would be launched and how we communicate those to farmers.
So there's a lot of detail here, Colette. You talk about training for farmers and things. What training and what level of training is farmers going to get for this? There's a lot of detail, what I can see here, going forward.
Yeah.
For this.
Yeah.
So what support and what level of training will be given?
Well, there'll be quite a lot in terms of the training, and we can talk to you on that perhaps in more detail at the next session. But there is a whole measure in the Rural Development Programme that covers knowledge transfer, innovation, and cooperation. Now, within that, then there'll be a range of different measures. There'll be potentially training under the measure Farm Family Key Skills, and that's training to help farmers and farm families to adapt to changing needs of the industry, to assess the development needs of their business, to help them in developing a business plan for their business, and so on.
Okay.
So, that's one element of it, but there's a range of others.
Going ahead here, but okay.
You're going to get a full blast of this in a few minutes.
That's right,
Go to the next session.
I'm getting dog there. Okay.
Just on this issue, Chair, would you be linking the farmers who would potentially be building some of these calf rearing facilities to those who are engaged in a dairy genetics programme to improve the quality of beef? Is that part of it?
That's part of it, yeah. There's two sides of it, but we have the genetics link in it as well, and we think that's relatively fast.
And is the genetics side compromising the milk production?
It shouldn't do, is the answer. There is. We've had discussions, if you like, with experts in the room, so I'm not very careful that I don't step into that place, because there's always someone in the room that knows more about it than I do. But there has been debate about simply taking 40% of the animals out of the dairy chain in terms of beef coming out of that side. There's been discussion about the need to continue to create the dairy herd, prime stock. So there's been an element of just steaming calves out of the dairy herd, and then the replenishment of the dairy herd for milk production as a separate activity.
Yeah, well, the milk cows are basically a byproduct of the dairy business, and you believe you can make them into an asset to it?
Yeah. Absolutely. We have that in place already, but on a very small scale. It is a question of how to get the right answer and make it into, let's say, a full-scale production technique.
Okay, and can I say that in the dairy farm myself, I am aware that there are opportunities in that regard. I think that that should be absolutely followed up. Tony, can I thank you, and I'll left with us in a moment or two anyway, but I thank you again for your presentation and for your answers, and wish you well in your new post. And I look forward to seeing that improvements in that sector as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm learning a lot fast. It was much easier when I was looking at it from a distance.
Agenda item 3, Chairperson's business. Can I advise members that I had an introductory meeting with the Minister this morning, as is normal procedure upon the appointment of a new chairperson. Can I also advise members that a number had a meeting with Farmers for Action this morning, and the Deputy Chairperson, myself, and a number of members. So the committee staff were present at that meeting and are typing up a note of the discussion to bring back to the committee in due course. And once we have that note, the committee will consider and decide on its response to that particular issue of Farmers for Action's proposals. Okay. Can I also advise members that I will be meeting with the Permanent Secretary and his team of officials on Wednesday, the 15th of October, which is tomorrow. Can I advise members that the planned stakeholder event for the committee review has been provisionally booked in Greenmount College. This is opposed to Lockbury, as they had no availability. The date remains the same as originally planned, 20th of November 2014. Staff are currently working on the guest list. Can I advise members that I've agreed to speak at a seminar in London on the 11th of December 14. It is on CAP, next steps for implementation and supporting the rural economy. Details of this event are at pages 9 and 10. This seminar is free of charge to committee members. Should any other member wish to attend the seminar, which, if free of charge, can they please advise the clerks so that flights and accommodation can be arranged. Okay. Agenda item 4, minutes of the meeting 7th October 2014. Can I refer members to draft minutes of the meeting on the 7th of October 2014 at pages 12 to 16? Are members content that the draft minutes are accurate?
Chairman, just on a wee note that we agreed to send a letter to the Minister regarding the APHIS system. I think we also said that we should send the same letter to the Permanent Secretary, given that he is overall charge of the administrative functions.
Okay. You mean that? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Then I say.
Okay, yes, what
Oh, yes.
Okay. Agenda item 5, can I refer members to matters arising at page 19 to 21. Are members content to action matters arising as suggested on index sheet on page 18? Okay. Agenda item 6, we have a briefing from RSPB for Rural Development Programme 2014 to 2020. Can I refer members to the briefing paper at page 23? As agreed last week, we have found a half-hour slot for this presentation. We have with us today Anne-Marie McDevitt, John Martin and Colin Delaney. Can I ask you to take no more possible than about 5 minutes to give us a presentation, and then we will follow with some questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman, the RSPB wants to take this opportunity to thank you and to thank the committee for our invite here today, and also to congratulate you on your new role as well. As the committee may be aware, the RSPB has a long history of working in political institutions to help bring about positive environmental change within society, and in particular across our rural landscape to convince those who legislate to invest in nature. We're also a campaigning organisation, and work with supporters to garner public support for our policies. As well as providing on-the-ground habitat advice for local farmers, we advocate innovative policy solutions based on sound science and publicly campaign for greater environmental sustainability. Indeed, we've invested a significant amount of time and resource into working to influence the next RDP, because we believe that it can be a fundamental building block in helping to address the ongoing declines of many of our iconic native species. In particular, we believe that agri-environment schemes are amongst the best mechanisms to reverse the declines witnessed over recent decades. And just as a way, a bit of context, our Give Wildlife Friendly Farming Future campaign in 2013 brought together our members and supporters, including our Young Campaigners group, and more than 70 farmers who signed a letter to the Dard Minister urging her to transfer the maximum amount of funding possible to ensure both farmers and the environment can continue to benefit from agri-environment schemes. After successive meetings with MEPs, the Minister, officials, members from this committee, we welcomed the budget announcement, in particular the funding to protect the rural environment. So I would just like to pass on to my colleague Marie McDevitt, who will go into a little bit more detail and give a little bit more context.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to say a wee bit more about who we are and what we do. Some of the committee members will know us well and some won't, so I think I'll take us through that. And then say why agriculture and rural communities are so important to us at RSPB. I don't know, I'll try and stay within the 5 minutes.
Okay.
So just to say that the RSPB has been active in Northern Ireland since 1966. So in 2016 we'll be celebrating our 50th anniversary, and we hope that we'll be doing that with some of the people around this table. We've come a long way since then, but our principles have remained the same. Obviously, we're a non-government organisation. Our mission is simple. We want to create a better Northern Ireland for wildlife and for people. We want to protect what we have here for future generations to enjoy. Some of you will have seen that we've kind of rebranded as an organisation, and that's really to make it clearer about what we do and also to gather more support, because, as probably many of you know, nature is in real trouble out there, and we need to build even more support. So we have a new logo, and you'll now hear us talking about giving nature a home. It's not that we've moved away from birds, but a lot of the time when we're working on birds, we're also having benefits for a range of other species and habitats as well. So what do? We work in partnership with local people all over Northern Ireland, school children, farmers, community groups, and here today with government officials. We own and manage 10 nature reserves. So we have reserves down in Lower Lough Erne Islands, which you'll be maybe less familiar with, but we also manage land on Rathlin Island, which some of you will be familiar with, that we manage for Chuff and Corn Creek, and we run the Seabird Centre there. So we work very closely in those areas with farmers and with local communities. We run educational programmes, we carry out scientific research and species recovery work, and we provide advice to a wide variety of organisations. A lot of what we do is really aiming to influence policy and legislation and working with politicians, because we can't do everything ourselves. And so we work in agricultural policy, planning policy, marine policy, anything that's really going to has potential to have a positive or negative impact on wildlife. We try to get involved in it. We have about 50 staff involved in our work in Northern Ireland, helping to reverse the declines of endangered wildlife and habitats, and they're supported by volunteers. We've got about 14,000 hours of volunteer hours, which equates to about 8 full-time equivalents, so that really boosts our workforce. And we have 12,000 members in Northern Ireland, 1.2 million members across the UK. So that's a wee bit about us, but I'd like to say a bit about why we're interested in agriculture and rural communities, which obviously is relevant to what John is going to talk about next. Why are we interested in agriculture? Well, 3/4 of the landscape out there is farmed. Sorry, Stella, am I going to go over time? I'm going to go over time. Do you want me to?
It's up to you.
Just no finish, okay. I'll give you that.
Because John's going to take another couple of minutes then.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Okay. No fur.
I'll finish up in a few minutes. So the landscape is farmed out there, and as you know, we've seen a big decline in much of our farmland wildlife. So stuff like our breeding waders, who we've talked about quite a lot about in the past to the committee, have declined by over 80%, and species such as that. And really this has been mirrored by the intensification of agriculture over time, so no surprises there. There's been a lot of changes since the 50s. We've moved from mixed farming systems to more intensive and more specialised systems. So for a lot of the species out there, agriculture can be, if agriculture is not done properly, it can be part of the problem, but it also can be part of the solution. And we're working with over 300 farmers out there at the minute to show that we can actually make things work, both for farming communities and for the wildlife on the ground. So I just want to mention very briefly 2 of the projects that we've been involved in with farmers. One of them, the committee should be fairly familiar with, the Yellowhammer project, where we've worked with farmers and we've given them advice and training in key areas, and we've managed to bring about increase in species such as Yellowhammer, 80-90% increases in those species. We're also involved in a very large $1 million Interreg funding bid, and we've got funding to work in key areas for breeding waders, and we're managed to turn around the declines in species that have declined by about 90% and are turning around those declines on the ground. So really, I guess the key message today is that we think that agri-environment schemes within the Rural Development Plan can work. We've shown that they can work, and they can work if they're targeted, if advice and training is given to the farmer, and that they could have, and that really what we want to see over the long term is we want to see farmers given money for public goods for public money. So I'm now going to hand you over to John Martin, and he's going to talk you through our key asks and what they are for the next programme.
Okay, thank you, Anne-Marie. I'll not say too much about the next rural development programme because I know Dart are up next and they'll give the detail on that. But I suppose in general the next RDP essentially starts this year or next year and runs until 2020. And that's centred around the Europe 2020 strategy, which seeks to have high-level aims of smart, sustainable and inclusive growth. There are 6 priorities in the Rural Development Programme. I suppose the ones that are of most interest to the RSPB are priorities 4 and 5, which are restoring and enhancing ecosystems and promoting resource efficiency. And this moves us away from the old axis structure that existed in the last programme, with the intention of that the new Rural Development Programme is more cross-cutting. So as my colleagues have stated before, and hopefully as Dart will attest, we've been fully involved in the consultation programme that's gone up to this point, that has developed the draft RDP, and that's going to be submitted soon to the European Commission for approval. The RSPB was very supportive of the consultation process and applauds Dart for the wide range of views they've taken on board. However, we raised concerns earlier in the process that the department, they were starting quite late in the day consulting with stakeholders, as colleagues in England, Scotland and Wales had started consulting on the programme several months before. Feedback now from the European Commission suggests that Northern Ireland is 1 out of 3 out of 130 countries that is yet to submit their programme. However, that will hopefully end this week as DARD submit the programme, and I guess our concern is that with the programme being submitted late, it would delay some of the payments going forward to farmers and agri-food industry on the ground that is reliant on agri-environment payments or rural development payments to help with new projects. We hope, however, due to the wide range of views taken on board by DARD, that the approval process will hopefully be quick and that there won't be any further delay in RDP spend. In terms of the RDP itself, and in particular agri-environment, the RSPB believes, as Anne-Marie has said, that given the right mix of options and appropriate funding in place, the schemes can do a lot to both support farmers and reverse or halt biodiversity declines. The RSPB has been working on the principle that if agri-environment schemes are funded to allow farmers access, targeted to where the need is greatest, and where training and advice goes alongside delivery, then the schemes are heading in the right directions. This is the principle we have been using on our own projects, and they are showing favourable results so far. As I said previously, Dart will take you through the budget, but I suppose a quick note from us in that this time last year we were majorly concerned that there wasn't going to be any budget at all for rural development, and last December we were majorly concerned due to the lack of transfer of funds resulting from the court case in December, but Dart have brought forward a budget which has received widespread support from a range of stakeholders, and that's actually worth more than the last rural development programme. To ensure that this limited budget then is spent well, our other principles come into play here. So the fact that we want schemes to be targeted to the right place and advisory services and training to go alongside to help those schemes be as effective as possible. Although we have a draft programme which mentions the importance of these things, There is still little detail on how some of this stuff is actually going to be delivered on the ground. The design of different agri-environment options is ongoing by the department, but we had hoped that this would be further along in the process to this stage. To date, there's been little stakeholder involvement in this process, which has been disappointing for us. And the RSPB would hope to act as a helpful and not a hindrance in developing these schemes and using our experience from projects on the ground to help with the detail. So in summary, I suppose we are a big supporter of the Rural Development Programme, especially agri-environment schemes. We look forward to the RDP being rolled out next year or the year after, so many more farmers can benefit from agri-environment schemes. And in general, I think we would like support from the committee for our three key asks, which were to support the allocation of the budget towards agri-environment, support the targeting of the options to where the need is greatest, and then to support the use of training and advisory for farmers to ensure that this is as effective as possible. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Does the RSPB feel that all farmers should be able to apply to the new agri-environment scheme irrespective of land type?
I can take that one. I guess it's down to the budget. If there was budget to ensure that all farmers could get into agri-environment, then we would love to see all farmers getting into it. I suppose we have had to develop our asks because there is a limited budget and there's not an opportunity for all farmers to get in. So I guess we want the best bang for your environmental buck when you're spending on the environmental schemes. So that's why we said target to where the need is greatest. So absolutely, if there was an option to get all farmers in to agri-environment programme and for them to deliver environmental good, then we would love to see that. But unfortunately, there isn't the budget to make that happen.
There's some concern in the implementing of the new agri-environment schemes and how that could impact if there's a gap between the old scheme finishing and the new scheme commencing. Have you any concerns about that?
Yes, I guess we have concern in that the programme is starting a little later than we'd hoped. So there might be a gap between when some schemes run out and when the next schemes start. We would like to work alongside the department to put some mitigation measures in place, and I know that the department are working on that as we speak. So there's a slight concern that some farmers could fall off the system, and then it would be a lot of administrative burden to get them back into the system again. So there is a slight concern there, yes.
Okay. Edwin Poots.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Just notice, you have a wee comment here about RDP budget being directed towards Agri-Food Strategy Board, which we're hearing from there. The recommendation within Goal for Growth, and you'd have concerns that this may drive the industry down an unsustainable path on doing a lot of good work already done by farmers through the Agri-Environment Programme. Now, my suspicion is that what the Going for Growth is doing won't lead to farmers pulling out hedges or trees that they planted under the Agri-Environment Programme. And is it not the case that there is the opportunity to do both, to actually have a sustainable agriculture which can continue to grow and can continue to produce more food because there's more people in the world, whilst at the same time managing wildlife to be better than done in the past? And is a lot of that not achievable through concentrating on high quality environment schemes? So, say somebody has 200 acres of land, they're not trying to do something right across all 200 acres. There's a lot of good food production going on there, but there may be 5 or 6 acres which is particularly suitable, dotted around different parts of the land. And you support really good schemes in those areas where you can have a high intensity of wildlife benefiting from it.
Yes, I would agree definitely with that. I suppose our concern with the agri-food strategy is that initially when it was first drafted there was little consultation with the environmental sector, so I guess we were concerned that our views hadn't been taken on board and that this would lead to further intensification of the industry without that sustainable still. So I suppose we like to look at agriculture through the eyes of sustainable development, where society, the economy and the environment all benefit from that level of intensification. And there's been a term being bandied about a lot, which it's in the agri-food strategy, which is sustainable intensification, but we're not big fans of that explanation of how the industry should go forward, because there hasn't been actually a working definition that many people have been able to grab a hold of, which says this is what sustainable intensification means or looks like. So yes, I would agree that they both need to happen hand in hand, but I guess that comment is more that our concern with the Agri-Food Strategy Board was that our initial concerns hadn't been taken into account, and that it was kind of ploughing ahead without maybe some necessary environmental inclusions that we thought it needed to be. So, for example, the Rural Development Plan had to go through quite a significant SEA, Strategic Environmental Assessment, and the Agri-Food Strategy didn't have to get one of those. So we thought it was quite important that the Agri-Food Strategy should have to get an SEA, because it was obviously going to have an impact on the environment through incentivising farmers to be more efficient. So I guess that's where those concerns had come from originally.
I suppose a good example of what you're describing there as intensive whilst being sustainable would be a scheme. I think RSPB were involved in it up in the Glens, where you had groundbirds, hen harriers, etc., where you had a scheme there which was promoting the development of the hen harrier. It also suited the farmer because it took out a lot of the foxes, and the fox population had got out of hand in that area. So the bird population was disappearing, but obviously the foxes would have been taking a lot of lambs as well. So the end conclusion of that, and why a lot of the farmers, I believe, were very happy to engage in that scheme, was that they sold more lambs. You got more of your hen harriers, and we had a fox population which was under some degree of control. So is that not a kind of an example where you can actually have more growth in terms of the farming, but also ensure that you can sustain the wildlife population?
Well, I think it is. But one thing that you were talking earlier in the going for growth really is the fact that the small farmer, in many cases in Northern Ireland, those small farmers are maybe in what we call high nature value areas. So even if they could never really strongly intensify, and what we're saying, I guess, is we'd like to see those farmers paid. But paid for farming for wildlife, but for farming for carbon, farming for what we call public goods. And I think that you may have to have a kind of a mix of that in Northern Ireland, because it won't be possible for everybody to go through this kind of intensification and produce food. And if you do that too, that we intensify across Northern Ireland and produce a lot more food, do you want to do that at the expense of your blanket bogs, which store carbon? Do you want to do it at the expense of landscape, and do you want to do it at the expense of wildlife? There's kind of got to be a middle ground between the two.
But I think lowland farmers want to participate as well and ensure that they have a good quality wildlife, and those people will also ensure that they produce a lot of food, but they don't want to be producing food exclusively. I think many of them want to engage with programmes which can enhance their farms from an environmental aspect as well.
Ultimately, I suppose we would like to see that as well, but I guess wildlife at this time has kind of been hemmed into kind of targeted areas, and because we have limited resources as an organisation, we have to work then within the targeted areas where the wildlife is. So yes, absolutely.
The yellow hammers, for example, would be lowland because
exactly,
forage not
so County Down is the last kind of bastion of cereal production in Northern Ireland, although there are dotted parts across the countryside, but that's where all our seed-eating farmland birds kind of seem to do well. So I guess that's why we targeted a project to that location.
And it's where we talked sometimes too about having an actual strategy, a spatial land use strategy for Northern Ireland. They talk about agri-food strategy, but because we're a small place and we want an awful lot out of it, I think we could do with some kind of, we have started developing a land use strategy where we look at where do you want things to go, where do you want your renewable energy to go, where do you want your wildlife areas to go, where do you want your more intensive farmland to go? And I think Northern Ireland probably needs that.
Okay. Who will burn it?
Thanks, Chairman. I welcome the presentation, and I would also sort of commend you for the balanced approach you're taking to the issue.
Yeah.
What comment would you have to make in relation to the nitrates directive, the carbon footprint, and our use or other ways of fertilisers in our agriculture in Northern Ireland?
The RSPB welcomed the Nitrates Directive when it came into play in Northern Ireland because we thought it was a good strategic use of the department and farmers' time to help better use nitrates, because I think probably one of the things it has done is driven the industry to a place where they're getting more from the things that they put in the ground. There is obviously still one of the major things contributing towards Northern Ireland not meeting the Water Framework Directive is diffuse pollution, a lot of which comes from agriculture, so we're still not 100% on the way there yet to actually delivering to a higher standard as we need to, but we think the direction of travel is good. On pesticides, I suppose we're encouraged to see a project in the Derg that is being led by Northern Ireland Water, NIEA and the Ulster Farmers Union, which is taking a catchment approach to help and reduce pesticides in the Derg, which has a significant problem there. So we'd like to see more projects like that on the ground. That is a partnership between industry and government to help solve a problem.
Okay, and Chairman, what about biodiversity? How much of a policy thrust can you have in relation to DARD's policies in that matter?
Yeah, I suppose Anne-Marie might want to say something of that, but everything we do as an organisation seeks to help halt or reverse biodiversity declines in Northern Ireland. So we're set up in our business model to help, I guess, help society to prevent further biodiversity declines. So there's a draft biodiversity strategy going through DOE at the minute, and we've been involved in that consultation exercise as well, and it has a set of recommendations for each government department, because every government department has a biodiversity duty to help reverse the decline of biodiversity. Nationally and internationally, Northern Ireland has signed up to the Nagoya Agreement, which has a target for 2020 to help reverse or stop biodiversity declines. The original target was 2010, and all societies across the world missed that target, which was a real travesty. So we're hoping that governments will now galvanise and help reach the target by 2020.
And are DARD on the same page as you, or are they diverging from you?
Yeah, well, I suppose the major thrust of DARD's helping to meet that biodiversity target is through the Agri-Environment Programme. And one thing I would say about the Agri-Environment Programme is it's one of the only mechanisms out there that is helping the sustainability of the wider countryside. Because we know DOE have gone through major budget cuts recently, and they're finding it difficult to reach their targets, but the Agri-Environment Programme should provide in and around 163 million between now and 2020 to help farmers deliver sustainability in the wider countryside. So DARD are responsible for that funding, so that is their major contribution.
Thanks, Chairman.
Okay, Oliver McMullen.
Yes, Chair, thank you, and thanks for your presentation. Yeah, you have answered most of you have answered what I have in my head. If we are looking at change in agriculture, as we heard from the previous presentation, into a more modern day agriculture, more intensive farming that will pay, it's going to leave a lot of smaller farmers out there to go into something else. Are we going to end up to be a nation of bird watchers? Because this ground is, if the smaller farmer is going to be encouraged to go into something else in farming, what is it? Is going to be paid to leave his ground, or wildlife, that sort of thing? Is forestry going to be a competitor for ground? Going to leave less ground for agriculture? Those are the kind of questions I
was just going to say before
really.
Any of my colleagues come in with the proper detailed response, if we start losing farmers from the countryside, we'll not have any birds to watch or anything else.
Well,
I think the thing, Oliver, is we're not talking about, we need the farming to have all this wildlife. This is a farmed landscape. Your landscape looks the way it does because of farmers. Mm-hmm. Even your heather moorland, your cereals, your grassland all look that way. The hedges are all there because of farmers. So the wildlife is all there because of them as well. Yeah. We want to keep farmers on the land, but we don't always think it's just about food production. So we want to see them funded, more and more funding going on the agri-environment schemes, yes, we want to see them produce stock because they need stock and machinery to manage the land, but we want to see them paid for the landscape they produce, for the carbon that they store in the bogs, for the wet grasslands and how it filters water, and we call that public goods. And that still doesn't, I think it takes a while to get across. And that's what we want. So we don't see it always about food production. We want to see farmers paid for the things that you see around you.
Do you think it's not possible, with a flat rate coming in, and quite a lot of the farmers now are under ASSIs, things like that there? And,
well, we think that that's why more and more money should go to, because agri-environment schemes they've shown elsewhere in England and Wales that whenever you put money into them, they create jobs and they keep people on the land. Subsidies haven't always done farmers a favour over the years, so it's a big ask that we're saying, but over time we're saying we'd like to shift the money away from subsidies to paying for these things. Because as we've said, if we don't have farmers, we don't have the wildlife, we don't have the landscape that you see. Northern Ireland wouldn't look the same.
One of the things, I suppose, just to add to that, is that if we are incentivising these guys to continue to farm in a certain way, we think that there should be some level of marketing for their product. So if they're farming in a way that is sustainable, for example, beef in the uplands, if they're kind of managing peatland with cattle that they're then able to sell at a premium because of the public good that they're providing through that sensitive management, then we think those farmers should get an increased payment for that, that form of marketing, that's there. So we think those high-end products could be one of the future success stories for Northern Ireland, but that's one of the things that we felt wasn't actually included in the Agri-Food Strategy Board, was where the small farmer is delivering significant public goods, not just for the environment, but he also is farming at a low intensity level that he should probably get a premium for his product for what he's providing for everybody else.
Well, in the present, if you look at the present system of farming, the present value of what the farmer is producing, that's not viable. And this is what's worrying a lot of the farmers. They're caught between a rock and a hard place here. If they're too small to be viable the whole time. And what else are they going to take up if they're too small for farming? They're not. There's nothing out there to back that up. If this present government, who's hell bent on taking us out of Europe, they haven't stepped up to say it. They will replace the money that Europe is putting in at the minute for all these schemes. So we seem to be going back, and this government is not helping at all. So this is the problem with the small farmer, and more the small farmer is progressing from 10, 15 acres. Now all of a sudden these 30, 35, 40 acres is now becoming a small farmer.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's why we're wanting to kind of see more money into agri-environment to help these guys maintain viable farm businesses in the uplands. So yeah, we would like to see funding targeted to the right places, but also Anne-Marie had mentioned a socio-economic study that was done in Wales, that for every £1 spent on agri-environment schemes, it generated £1.32 in the local economy, and nationally it looked like for every £1 spent it generated £32. So we'd like to actually see a similar study done in Northern Ireland over the course of this next rural development programme, so that we're able to sell the agri-environment message to people on socio-economics, not just the environment.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Sidney Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Correct me if I'm wrong. Anne-Marie, do you say there was 300 farmers you're working with at present?
Yeah.
I know the Chair asked the initial question to John there, how many farmers you would like to probably engage with. How does the 300 compare? What size of farm? We're talking about small farms and things.
Well, I suppose
what's the 300? What are they making up at present?
So the first thing to say is why we're only working with 300 is that we kind of use those as we work with a certain number to show a thing works, and then we use that for people like yourselves to say if we had more of this, if we had more funding, we could do more. So we use them as kind of examples. In terms of the sizes of farms, most of those farmers are that's Yellowhammer farmers in County Down. And farmers up in Antrim and down in Fermanagh as well. So they can be anything from 40 hectare farms right up to about 150 hectare farms, really. So just varying in size.
Right across the...
So some of the interim farmers could be quite big, quite large, working for breeding waders, but it could be right alongside somebody that's 40 hectares. So a range of farm sizes within the project.
When you say you like to engage with possibly as many farmers as possible, and you have 300 present, realistically, where would you like to see it going in the future to increase the 300 to what, say?
Well, if you see it this way, that we use the work on the yellowhammer and the breeding waders because those species are doing so badly that we want to start to protect them straight away. But then we use that work then to say we want to actually, more money in agri-environment so that what we're doing here can happen across Northern Ireland on a much bigger scale. We're not necessarily going to be able to do it, but
where would you like to be, say, at 2020? Where would you like to see your engagement with the farm?
Well, I suppose in the key areas for those species. So a lot of the time we're talking about in the main areas which used to be arable, because that's really wildlife-rich areas too. Down along the Lochshore area, so Loch Ney and Loch Earn. And then up in the mountains too, where there's heathland.
Basically, that's where you'd like to see your work.
Yeah, I mean it's quite a big area in Northern Ireland. Aye.
Yeah. We've produced an indicative targeting map which shows, I guess, the priority options we'd like to see in those areas, and kind of drawn, I guess, lines on a map which suggests, if we worked in this area, these are the species we'd be able to save. Because I think one of the stark reminders, I guess, that we got recently as an organisation, that we did a survey last year, and was a follow-up survey from 1987, and it was over a suite of 4 breeding wader species, and it showed that between 1987 to 2013 those species had declined by 83%. So essentially, if we don't do anything in the next 10 to 15 years, those species are going to be extinct from Northern Ireland. And those are once common farmland birds that everyone would know to see: curlew, redshank, snipe and lapwing. So that's a sign that there's something seriously wrong in those areas, that these species are going down. And usually when the bird species goes down, it's matched with other taxa and plants and things like that, and habitats. They're usually in decline as well. So we think that at breeding waders in particular, we really need to throw the kitchen sink at them in the next 10 to 15 years to ensure their survival for future generations.
Do you have earmarked certain species that's going forward that are...
So 160 of those farmers are in those areas there, and that's because you don't, once they've gone down by 90%, you don't want to lose them anymore. So we go in as emergency into certain areas, and then the idea is then over time you want to spread out into greater areas as
more
well.
Early intervention to stop the decline so rapidly.
Yeah.
I understand that. Well, that's good to know. I appreciate that and your work, and I wish you well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Being a farmer myself, I think farmers notice an increase in wildlife just across Northern Ireland. I mean, even in areas that are not been targeted, but we'd see quite a large increase on the ground in badger population. Are you aware of any increase in the numbers of badgers in Northern Ireland?
I couldn't really comment on that, to be honest, but we probably could come back to you with more information on that if you want. We do have a position on badgers and TB, but essentially would not maybe get into that today. But we can provide that briefing to the committee if you'd like that.
At some stage, that's okay.
The only thing to say is this year has been, because of the weather, I'm sure farmers got more crops out of it all too, and birds did actually really well. Wildlife all over the place did really well, just as a result of the kind of warm weather and not too wet, not too dry kind of weather as well. So whether that's what people are seeing out there.
I know I'm aware you used to support the vaccination of badgers. You don't support the limited cull of badgers where there's a lot of TB?
No. The science has showed that the perturbation effect increases by 23% on the badgers outside the cull area. So that, as an organisation, one of our principles is that we make policy decisions based on sound science, and the sound science has showed that would be the impact on those outside areas. So we feel that that may make the situation worse rather than better.
Are you aware that the controlled culling of badgers in the Republic of Ireland has seen a reduction in TB?
Yes, although that research was good. I suppose it was over a short time period, which the other research was over a longer time period. So we would like to kind of see some of the follow-up research from that area to ensure that that research is as robust as possible.
Okay. Ian?
Right, thanks, Chair. A couple of the points that I was wanting to make there have been covered, but I'll just, in the course of the conversation, forestry, have discussions, or do you find yourself sometimes in conflict there with forestry, as regards their native species and return of bogland and stuff like that to that?
Yeah, definitely. Forest Service have an indicative planting map which shows where you should and shouldn't plant trees, and a lot of their current stock of trees is actually on places where on their map it says you shouldn't plant them. So a lot of the trees in the uplands were planted post-Second World War, and they're planted actually on bogland, and today if they were going to plant those same trees today, they wouldn't plant them. They would probably keep the bogland intact, because a lot more research has come out in the past 10 years just about the importance of peatland, especially in Europe, and Northern Ireland has a good percentage of peatland in its landscape. Its importance for holding water back during floods, for filtering water, for water quality, also for storing carbon. The actual carbon store in peatland is a lot higher than normal soil. So yeah, we are supportive of obviously trees, but trees in the right places, we would always say, and we would like to actually see a lot of the trees that are on peatland actually removed, and see the peatland restored. We think that would be a lot better for the climate in the long run than actually having the trees there in the wrong place.
Yeah, okay. Well, just to localise it, we're talking about Bulrush, they extract peat down and outside Balahi. There's part of that ground now has been dug out, if you like, right? So is there a competition there between, say, the like of yourselves, and forestry
No.
to replant that?
No, there's no competition, and I know you've met with Seamus Burns. Seamus is actually working alongside Bulrush because they have committed to restoring that area, and in their agreement with Forest Service was to leave 1 metre of peat on the site, which then they'll hopefully try to restore. Now, it'll never be restored back to the lowland raised bog that it was maybe 40 years ago, but it'll at least have some level of restoration in place, and we know that already that they have got restoration in place, and that it is actually starting to take hold and work well. So Seamus is going to continue to work alongside them to ensure that that is going to deliver a good restoration project.
I can make sure you get an update on that.
Aye, please.
If you'd like.
Thanks very much, Chair.
Edwin?
Thanks, Chair. Any good news for us in terms of species improvements?
Oh, that was great news. 90% increase in yellowhammer and those breeding waders. I had to cut myself down before. This Interreg project that we were working on, we've got increases in the breeding waders there from 260 to 450 pairs. That's only over a couple of years. Farmers working on 160 farmers working on 4,500 hectares of habitat. They're controlling 800 hectares of scrub and rush. And what the farmers love about management for breeding waders is that it means that they're grazing more, it means that they're controlling rush, so the quality of their sward gets better, and then they're less worried about their single farm payments too, because they tend to be concerned if they're if they're infested with rush, that they maybe lose their single farm payment as well. So I think it's been a win for wildlife, but also for the farmers, which is why we're getting them taking up the advice so much, is that they love the way the fields are looking. Now, once they go in and manage them for the breeding waders. Yeah.
And what about some of those other ground-based birds and so on?
Well, the two big groups that we try to focus our work, because we can't do everything. So the main things that we work on are the breeding waders, because they're in decline, seed eaters, because we've lost a lot of cereal in Northern Ireland, and I've just maybe mentioned those. But the other things that we work on are chough and corncrake on Rathlin as well, and we focus on things that are really in decline. So we don't really work on garden birds because they're doing okay, and we don't really work on woodland birds because we don't have a huge amount of woodland. As John says, we're more interested in getting woodland off bogs there. In terms of Rathlin, we've got the habitat in good condition now, so we're trying to work with colleagues elsewhere in the UK to see if we can actually get some corncrakes on Rathlin, and get them calling down corncrakes from elsewhere and try and get the corncrake back to Northern Ireland.
Okay.
Alderman Wall.
Just very quickly, do you support cutting turf?
That's a big question, really. We don't support it where it's happening illegally. So where people have turbary rights on sites, then that's their existing rights. But wherever there's illegal removal of peatland, so there's been a big problem on Slieve Bay, big cross-border site, which we're very concerned about.
I suppose turbary rights have been in existence for a long time, and it would be seen as a fairly sustainable way of doing it because it's so small scale. But I guess, as Anne-Marie said, there is some illegal extraction of peatland, and that causes major destruction. It decimates sites beyond, unrecognisable almost after they've been in with huge mechanised machinery, and we would be, very, very against that, and we would expect the legal system to come down heavily on those that are doing it illegally.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I think that's all the questions. Thank you very much for your presentation.
All right.
Thank you.
Sorry for going over.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before I move to agenda item 7, I'm told there is a possibility of a division about 3:30, so in that event we may have to adjourn for 10 or 15 minutes for the vote, that vote. Okay. We're going now to have an oral briefing from DARD, Rural Development Programme 2014 to 2020. I refer members to the memo from the clerk at pages 26 to 34. There's also a memo which names all the sub-measures or projects at pages 35 to 37. The papers from the department are at pages 38 to 430. Can I welcome Colette McMaster, Assistant Secretary, Lorraine Linus, Principal Officer, and Brian Irvine, Principal Officer. Can I ask you to take no more than about 10 minutes, please, and to do your presentation, and then that will follow with some questions. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members, for the opportunity to provide you with a further update briefing on the development of the 2014-2020 Rural Development Programme. With me, Lorraine Linus, who's leading on developing the new programme, Brian Irvine from Environmental Policy Branch. I'd just like to advise you that our colleague Gareth Evans, who's from Rural Development Division, had hoped to join us following another meeting with the Minister this afternoon, but I understand he's not yet become available. The document that we've sent to the committee is the final draft of the new Rural Development Programme, which is now ready to be formally submitted to the EU Commission. This document has been drafted in the format required by the EU Commission, and as such it's a technical document which will be assessed by the EU Commission for admissibility and approval. The structure and required content of the Rural Development Programme are set out in the EU Implementing Regulation. As you're aware, the Minister announced on the 26th of June that the Executive had agreed a proposed budget for the next Rural Development Programme of up to £623 million. This is made up of approximately £186.5 million of EU funds, which will be matched with funding from the DARD budget, giving a total of £373 million, compared with the size of the current programme, which is approximately £540 million. The package of support agreed by the Executive for Rural Development also includes additional funding of up to £250 million for a farm business improvement scheme. Subject to uptake from industry, DARD will bring forward bids to the Executive for that additional funding of up to £250 million to fund the farm business improvement scheme that will meet the Agri-Food Strategy Board's request in Going for Growth. The Minister made a further announcement on the 23rd of July setting out the proposed allocations to individual schemes within the programme. These were indicative allocations which will be subject to EU approval, completion of proportionate business cases and delivery considerations. Scheme indicative allocations have now been adjusted to take account of programme technical assistance. There's an indicative allocation of up to £200 million for capital investment in farms. The indicative allocations for other measures include £163.2 million for a range of environmental actions to support farmers and land managers to carry out environmentally beneficial farming practices, £17.1 million for forestry and £65 million for areas of natural constraint. Knowledge transfer, innovation and cooperation will be an important element of the programme, with an indicative allocation of £33.1 million for a range of schemes. £80 million will be allocated for a range of measures aimed at encouraging the economic development of our rural areas. This includes a business investment scheme for rural businesses with an indicative allocation of £27 million, village renewal and basic services with £23 million, and rural tourism with £10 million. The funding for the programme is contingent upon securing the necessary EU match funding, and this will be managed through the various budget exercises and associated in-year monitoring rounds which the committee will have input to. This programme will straddle a number of budget periods. However, the most significant will be budget 2016 to 2020. One element of the programme which has still to be finalised is how the programme will be delivered. You're aware of the challenging fiscal environment facing all government departments, and members will be aware that the Executive agreed to reduce most departments' resource funding by 2.1% in June monitoring. The financial pressures which the department is facing may not only affect scheme allocations but also the staff resource available to deliver the RDP. In the current RDP, DARD absorbed the costs of delivery for 73% of the programme budget. However, the financial situation at the start of the new RDP is somewhat different from the situation in 2007. The Minister has agreed that the maximum amount of programme technical assistance must be utilised to assist DARD to deliver the programme. A technical assistance allocation of £37.2 million is therefore being created for this purpose. A final decision on the activities which this technical assistance will be used for is yet to be taken. We do know we'll use the funds for managing the Monitoring Committee and funding the Rural Network Support Unit. Over the next few weeks and months, we'll be carrying out an analysis of the costs and benefits of in-house delivery against external delivery options. We're going to submit the programme to the EU Commission based on the financial assumptions presented here today. However, there may well be some amendments to the programme finances before the programme is finally approved, or we may make a programme modification at a future date. The RDP Stakeholder Consultation Group met for the last time on the 24th of September to consider the programme documentation, and this included not just the draft programme document but also the Strategic Environmental Assessment, the Quality Impact Assessment and the draft ex-ante evaluation report. The stakeholder group has met 9 times over the last 2 years, and the group has provided valuable input at every stage of programme development. We're proposing to set up a new programme monitoring committee from December, which will have a role in both the current Rural Development Programme until its closure in 2016 and in the continuing development of the new programme. Moving now to the next steps, we're going to submit the programme formally to the EU Commission after this meeting today. The Commission are required to provide their formal comments on the programme draft within 3 months of submission, which will be mid-January. DARD will then work with the Commission to finalise the programme. Depending on the nature and extent of the comments, we would hope to have a final programme ready for formal Commission approval by April 2015. We intend to place all the programme documentation on the DARD website following the submission of the programme to the EU Commission. As I explained earlier, the draft document presented today is a technical document which requires EU approval in order to access the EU funding allocation of £186.5 million. The present document is not in a form that will be used to communicate the content of the next RDP to potential applicants. We've also developed a short summary document setting out key elements of the potential support available, and this document states that the programme is still subject to change up to the point when it's formally approved by the Commission. As well as seeking EU approval on the overall funding package, DARD officials are continuing to work to design the detail of the schemes. The date for the opening of any future calls will depend on the programme being approved by the European Commission and on getting the necessary business case approval. That's all I want to say at this point, and we're happy to answer any questions or provide further clarification, and would welcome any comments the committee would like to make on the draft programme at this stage.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Can I say that I declare an interest in a farmer myself, so I have a unique interest in the business investment scheme in particular, and I have had fears that in the past there's been a lot of red tape associated with some of the schemes in the past, and I think it's very important that farmers are not put off applying to the scheme, and it's not over bureaucratic. What can you tell us about how this will be rolled out, that it's not too bureaucratic in regard to that?
I suppose the first point maybe is in around the communication of it and how we'll do that, and what we, as we said just when I was opening, was that the document that you have, that huge document, is a technical document. That's not what we're planning to present to farmers or to potential applicants. So I think an important part of it will be developing the communication. And we want to make that a simple and straightforward process for people to understand what actually is going to be, what support is going to be available to them. When we talk about the Farm Business Improvement Scheme, and that came up earlier this afternoon when we talked about going for growth, and what it is really it's something that the Agri-Food Strategy Board have recommended. It's a package of support that is within the Rural Development Programme. And it is support that will be directed, targeted at farmers. So it's a package of measures that includes not just the capital investment that you mentioned. The business investment scheme will be part of that, and will actually be a considerable part of the monies allocated to that farm business improvement scheme. There'll be up to about £200 million allocated to the capital investment element. But in addition to that, there'll be a range of measures in there that will actually help to guide farmers towards making the right choices before they invest. So there'll be training elements, there'll be training measures in there, there'll be support for business discussion groups, where farmers can, in groups, share best practice and so on as well with their peers, and there'll be a range of other elements. All of that's sort of geared to farmers making the right choices, so that they're not actually, without having thought through carefully what they may want to do in their business, and that they have done that thinking in advance. What we're saying in terms of the Farm Business Investment Scheme is that a basic requirement or basic eligibility condition will be that farmers have a business plan for their farm showing how the overall performance of the business will be improved. So they'll have done that thinking before they come to that stage. What we also want to provide in designing the Farm Business Improvement Scheme is a signposting, sort of way of signposting farmers through that support. So there'll be different, every farmer be in a different situation, and some people may feel they want the training before making other decisions, others may not. They may be ready to make investments. So the signposting through that scheme will sort of help farmers know at which point they would be suitable for them to come in to support. So we're hoping to keep the communication sort of simple and straightforward, and that's what we'll be doing over the next period, while the Commission's looking at the technical document.
Okay, there's two tiers, Tier 1 and Tier 2, with two different proposed amounts of grant aid. How much money has been allocated to each, or has that been decided as yet?
We haven't actually made a decision on that as yet. There are the two tiers there. There is potential, and we had talked about, when we consulted on the draft programme, we had talked about potentially ring fencing in there. We haven't made that decision as yet. So we really, I think, want to see what the levels of uptake are going to be between, for the business investments scheme before determining that. It's something that we can decide locally. It doesn't have to be written into the programme that goes to the Commission that we would ring fence. So it may be something we do. We've talked to stakeholders about it, and stakeholders are aware that at this point we haven't decided to ring fence, but it's something we may do.
Okay, one would have thought it would be wise to, it would almost be too late to do it after there's a flood of applications. I would have thought you would need to do that at an earlier stage.
I think before we go out for applications, we'll be thinking through how we would do that, and whether we would be going in tranches and so on, and whether it would be one tier or the other tier, and how much would be.
I would have thought so. Okay. Declan McAleer.
Thank you, Chair. I know that, I know the Minister states that wants to have the lag set up as soon as possible, preferably by Christmas, and I'm aware that they have to thrash out their own local strategy, which has to be in tune with the Council's community plans. What has been the level of engagement yourselves and the councils to ensure, bear in mind that the shadow councils won't come into operation until the springtime? Are you confident that their community plan will be thrashed out in time, bear in mind that the LAG's local development strategy has to be in tune with that?
There was a series of discussions over the sort of summer period between officials and DART officials and the chief executives of the new councils, and talked through that sort of timing process. So it's been agreed that DART will continue working closely with the councils on this. Councils, and that includes sort of looking as to whether or not there can be a draft element of the community plan that relates to rural, developed at an earlier stage but finalised later. But our colleagues, certainly in the Rural Development Division, are continuing to work with councils on that so that they'll be able to manage that time frame.
So you're confident that it's doable like that?
Well, at this stage, that's my understanding, that it is possible, and the chief executives are sort of feel they could work within that time frame, but I think that's something that we'll keep under review as well.
Just a wee supplement there. See, the 80 million has been set aside there for the priority 6. See the fact that the department have then allocated individual amounts then to these individual schemes. That restrict the LAG's ability to manage their own budgets?
I think that I don't think it necessarily will. I mean, I think that each LAG will have its own local strategy within these are the overall allocations. I'm maybe bringing Lorraine on this, but in terms of how it's been managed in the current programme, there would have been a similar sort of arrangement where there were budgets for particular schemes, and then Leader had a role in delivering.
I think that the programme document, you have to do a certain amount of assessment yourself in terms of looking at the need in the rural areas across agriculture and across the non-agricultural areas. So we sort of set those indicative allocations based on the need that's set out in this document. And it's almost, I know Leader is a bottom-up approach, but it can't be totally bottom-up. It has to meet somewhere in the middle. So you have this overarching document that sets out the key aims and objectives for that EU funding. The local development strategies will then look at the need within their local areas. They will get an allocation, whatever that allocation key is, that they use to allocate the money to each of the LAGs. But they have to come into line with this strategy as well. It's not a total bottom-up approach. You know, there has to be a certain amount of direction within that. And that direction is being provided in us saying, this is what we think the budget allocations are. Now, that's not to stop in the future the programme being amended should the demand, and this is a 7-year programme, it can actually run to 2023. Needs over that time will change. And so it does mean that at some point, if you feel that, and that's happened in the current programme where money has moved between measures, where we felt that demand was higher in some measures than other measures. So there has to be an overarching strategy that says, here's where we think the need is, you fit in with this, but bring your needs to us and how you're going to fit in beneath that through your local development strategies.
So the programme is sufficiently robust then until be amended?
Oh, it can be amended. Yes, it can be amended. And we've done that in the current programme. We've amended and we're on version 10 of the programme currently, so we have changed it as we've gone along.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Tom Buchanan.
Of the money going into Tier 1s and Tier 2, what percentage of that do you estimate it'll take to roll out the programme?
Are you're talking in terms of the cost of the delivery cost?
Administration and that type of stuff.
Lorraine, could you pick up on the delivery costs?
On the delivery costs, the DART has never really quantified exactly what it costs DART itself to deliver the programme. We deliver, in the current programme, we've delivered up to 73% of the entire budget. And then a certain element was used for external delivery through an Access One delivery agent and also through the LAG administration. So we're maximising the technical assistance that can be capped at 4% of the EAFRD element within the programme, the EU element plus the national match. So we're using the full 37 million. We haven't yet decided which of those measures. We're going to do an internal review looking at the effectiveness of external delivery versus internal delivery, because even if we put it out to external delivery, we're still ultimately responsible for that money. So there is still a checking function that is required by DARD. So it's not a totally give it out and we can forget about it. That just doesn't happen. So the 37 million, that's the last stages that we have yet to decide in terms of what we spend that on. You will see in the costs, for example, that the 250 million that had been earmarked for the Farm Business Improvement Scheme, whenever you add the knowledge transfer and the 200 million for the business investment, that's coming down to 231. So we are earmarking some of that 250 to help DARD deliver this, because if we don't, we simply wouldn't be able to get the schemes off the ground. Now, what we use that money for, as I say, we've yet to decide.
Yeah. Will these schemes be delivered with less bureaucracy than the last schemes?
We would like to hope so. I mean, one of the key things that the Commission are pushing this time is the use of simplified costs and standard costs quite a lot. And this will be particularly useful for the knowledge transfer, the cooperation measures. And this is where there would be no need for procurement. We do the work up front. We work out how much it costs for meeting rooms, for per diem expenses, for mileage and so on. And then those are just reimbursed to the individual without them having to produce the invoices. The Commission, it also reduces the error rate quite considerably for the Commission, because they recognise that procurement is one of the main problems. Now, where that will help in some areas of the programme, it won't help in all. For the large capital, you will still require to go through public procurement, which is onerous at the best of times. And that's just something that we can't do anything about. But we will have to look at every stage of the development of this programme further and trying to reduce bureaucracy and red tape. And the Commission will be expecting us to probably report against that in the annual report each year and what we've done to reduce bureaucracy.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Alderman McMullen.
Yes, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. Going back to the funding aspect of it, there is a lot of talk of European banks or European financial institutions being used this time by these new councils, that they'll be able to use this, couldn't do before. If the present system of banking here is not favourable to lending out money, like for schemes to get off the ground, and this is one of the arguments that the managers had the last time. They blamed everybody, but to my mind, the people who were responsible. Is there any way we can get round this here, if that groups can be told they can apply to Europe for funding if the local banking system here won't support?
There was the opportunity to use financial instruments within the programme, but that was discounted quite early because we had to do a separate ex-ante review of that, and we couldn't demonstrate a market failure or a need, because it's not cheap money. You have to lend at the same rate, and so we couldn't come up with the evidence within across the rural development programme that there was a need to put a financial loan scheme in place in the programme. The one thing that we did then look at beyond that is the use of advances within the programme, particularly in and around community and voluntary groups and their access to capital. So we have included that. There was a sort of, it wasn't, advances weren't really, there were some limited advances within the current programme, but we actually have put it in this time in particular for those groups. Beyond that, you can look towards phased projects and trying to break projects down to enable projects to complete one stage so that they can have access to the funding and then move beyond that. We will keep an eye on the European Bank. There has been some moves by the EU Commission about the European Bank, the EIB getting more of a foothold into the likes of rural development programmes. So that's certainly where the Commission would like to go. They would like to see the money recycled, and that's why they introduced financial instruments into the programme. I'm aware that ERDF are introducing a loan fund within their programme as well. We simply lacked the expertise as well to undertake a loan fund, and we didn't think it was obviously taken back from stakeholders and the stakeholder consultation group as well. We decided early on it wasn't a route that the programme should go. But if the evidence became available later in the programme, it doesn't stop us from introducing a loan fund later at some stage.
And just on that, Chair, the likes of those advances could be made to local authorities or these new super councils, who in some cases will be the funding body, you know, and village renewal, stuff like that there, they'd be looking after groups like that there. And Invest NI, what role do they have to play? Can they play a role in advancing money or playing a bigger role in finance?
Well, if I take your first question in relation to councils, we haven't made provisions for councils to get advances, only for voluntary and community groups. We wouldn't have seen the evidence there that the councils couldn't have brought the match funding to the projects, you know, as they are. In relation to Invest NI have a role certainly in the Agri-Food Producer Investment Scheme, and I know, Colette, you've been talking to Invest NI about what they can possibly bring to the programme, in particular in relation to processing. If you want to say something about
Yeah, I mean, we've had some discussion with Invest NI, and I know that they are keen to help contribute towards that's the Agri-Food Processing Investment Scheme. In this current and the existing RDP, there was contribution from Invest NI in relation to the Processing and Marketing Grant Scheme. So it's something they would be keen to continue to do in the future. So we've had discussion and we'll be continuing discussion with them, but I know that they are keen to be involved in the future programme.
Yes, and I welcome that, but should we not be getting them to show their hand earlier than that? Because if this programme is getting underway and we're not going to waste time this time, we would need to know that at an early stage, that for anybody that wants to use it or would be feel comfortable about working with them and they know what's there.
Yeah, I think certainly it's not something that needs to be written into the programme going to the Commission, but it is something that we'll be working through with them over the next months.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. In the last programme, I was personally was one of the lags. I was critical of large strategic projects that are brought into play at the last use of money. In this programme, will every effort be made that rural businesses and rural communities will receive more of that money and not all go into strategic projects?
Well, the sort of breakdown of the schemes there for the rural under Priority 6 would include the Rural Business Investment Scheme, Village Renewal Scheme, Rural Broadband Scheme, Rural Basic Services, and the All Island Cooperation Scheme. There's an element of the Priority 6, which is the rural tourism, that is outside the leader, and that's something that certainly DARD would see as being DARD being involved in managing that one in terms of the strategic aspect of it, rural tourism, but the other schemes are intended for delivery through leader. Certainly.
Yeah, but as you're aware, in the last programme, through leader, years of money not all been spent, and the time frame on getting the programme up and running meant that there was large amounts of money that those fears would go back to Europe. So it ended up there was a number of strategic projects were rushed forward at the last minute. And I'm not so sure. I think it's important that we don't end up in the same position again.
I think certainly there are lessons learned from the existing programme. One of the things that we did do when we were preparing for this programme was to do a review of the leader approach in the last programme. So we've done that, and there's certainly in building in the arrangements for the local action groups this time round. I know that colleagues are developing those arrangements to take account of any good practice or lessons that we've learned. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. In relation to agri-food processing investment schemes, and there's two tiers again, and in the upper tier it is kept at 500,000 or
overall grant assistance not to exceed 500,000 for any one application, or not more than 1 million over the lifetime of the rural development programme. I'm told that's out of step with other regions of the United Kingdom, and Scotland and Wales having the cap on that. Is that right?
I'm not sure just on the other sorts of the other areas what their arrangements are, or whether they're all actually offering something similar to that in their new programmes. But just to explain how we've gone about in actually developing the programme here, and I suppose the good thing is that a rural development programme is a programme that you can design to meet the specific needs of your own area and your own situation. So we've the rural development programme proposals that we've got here are built on first of all identifying what the needs were in the Northern Ireland situation, and then designing measures that would address the needs that we found here. In relation to the need for capital support for the food processing sector, we have identified a clear need for support in continued innovation in the sector, including the artisan sector. So the need that we've identified recognises that support's needed for agri-food processing companies of all sizes to develop their long-term sort of competitiveness. So what we have been seeking to do, and I'm talking to stakeholders, and we have quite a wide range of stakeholders' views on this, is to actually address the needs of the smaller companies as well as the larger companies. Yeah. Now we have a relatively limited budget allocation to this, so it's really trying to find the best way of using that addresses everyone's needs as best as possible. And I suppose it's fair to say on that point, and there has been quite a bit of discussion with stakeholders about this, idea of a cap. And you've heard certainly Tony talk from the Agri-Food Strategy Board's point of view that that's something that they would not support from the board's point of view. But equally, we've a range of stakeholders who actually have been opposed to an idea of not having a cap. The concerns of the farming stakeholders and the stakeholders from the rural communities have been that there is a possibility. They're concerned that larger companies could come and access most of the grant support assistance, and that would then not be available for the smaller processors or the artisan companies. So suppose that we've been trying to balance the needs across the range of stakeholders, aware that it's not something that all have supported in terms of having a cap. But we have sought to address and to respond to comments from various stakeholders following the most recent stakeholder meetings in July and in September. We have made some changes to the proposed range in the grant assistance under that scheme. So it's something that obviously we'll continue discussions with stakeholders as well on this.
Yeah, I mean, the processing industry is large amounts of money invested. So I mean, it's just I feel it's important that if those that want to avail of it and are in a position to do so, that they're not left at the disadvantage of the rest of their competitors in England or Scotland and Wales. If Scotland and Wales can avail of our amounts of grant.
Yes, I'm just not sure what the position is in Scotland and Wales in terms of their any processing schemes that they're offering. I suppose one thing that is different that we're doing in this proposed programme is that in the previous programme the processing and marketing grant scheme wasn't open to large companies, and in this programme we have extended that to include large companies. So there are things that we've been seeking to do to go towards addressing the...
Something you will keep on the review or look at? Yeah,
it's certainly something that we're aware that there have been issues raised by stakeholders, and it's something we'll continue to discuss.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did I pick you up earlier, wrong or rightly, that 37 million for the delivery of the rural development programme? I mean, on the third-party delivery, am I wrong on that?
Yeah, no, it's 37 million, and if you include the up to 14 million that's sort of earmarked for Leader, that's a total of 51 million that will go towards administration and delivery.
It seems quite an amount. You know,
it's probably a fraction of what DARD actually pays in real costs in terms of delivering the programme, but that includes, for example, a possible over £1.5 million towards a network support unit. which we funded externally outside of the programme.
What percentage is that, Chair?
Pardon?
What percentage is that?
I think that works out at 8% in total out of the entire budget.
Is there any more questions for the officials? Do you want to come back? To come back at?
Is everyone happy? Is there any more questions? Because we have a division now, we have to leave. Is anyone, are you happy enough?
I'd just like to know what checks are done on councils to get the community plans in on time. I think that's vitally important.
Can you get a written answer to that?
You got a written answer to that? Is that okay? Okay?
And then you have 5 minutes when you come back.
Thank you.
I will need, yes, a few items of business just to finish. Okay? Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. Sorry for the rush at the last second. Okay.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room.
Agenda item 8, correspondence. Can I refer members to the correspondence received at pages 433 to 438? Are members content action correspondence as suggested on the index sheet at page 432? Great. Okay, members. Can I refer members to the correspondence from the Committee for Finance and Personnel at pages 437, 438? No, that's okay. That's all right. Sorry, that's not needed. Agenda item 9, forward work programme. Can I refer members to the forward work programme at pages 440 to 444? Can I remind members that there will be an informal meeting on the Tuesday, the 21st of October 2014 at 12 p.m. in room 30 with the Northern Ireland Retail Consortium. All members are encouraged to attend.
Sorry, Chair, they did that again.
Pardon?
Beg your pardon, what date was that again?
In room 30, there's an informal meeting with the NI Retail Consortium on 21st of October, which is next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday at 12 p.m. in room 30, okay?
12 You sent an email around. I'll send an email out, yeah.
Okay, okay.
Well, maybe I can attend that, the other committee.
Of course you do, that's right here.
Can I seek agreement for the forward work programme?
Right.
I know, pressure.
What about the visit on Friday?
Do you want to mention that?
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah,
Probably.
it was under your business.
Northern Ireland Ploughing Championships are at the Maze on Friday. If any member wants to attend, we propose to meet at 1 p.m.
1 p.m.
for a couple of hours at that. So if anyone wants to attend, originally we were to meet at 12, but I had to get that rearranged to 1. So.
Those members who said they were attending have been given a wee
Yes.
A wee folder.
It's
just
okay.
There's nothing, no committee event. It's just to walk around and see what's happening and things like that. Okay. So.
Nothing more in the proposed visit to Scotland. Then everyone happy.
No, we're fine. No,
okay.
We have a briefing on the Scottish visit, on who you're going to meet and what we're going to talk about, and the detail that your visit pack will be here next Tuesday as well.
Okay.
The plan what's it? That's Scotland. That's good.
Okay. What about yourself? You interested in going? No? Okay, that's all right. Agenda item 10, any other business? Is any other business? No other business now? Want to raise any issues? No. Agenda item 11, date and time of the next meeting. The next meeting of the Committee for Agriculture and Rural Development will take place on Tuesday, the 21st of October 2014 at 1:30 p.m. in room 30, Parliament Buildings. Can I remember the informal meeting with the Northern Ireland Retail Consortium again at 12 o'clock next Tuesday, and remind members of that. I declare the meeting adjourned.